Hey there, I'm Webb Bostic, president of Wonder Cave. And in these candid conversations, we meet with partners, peers, and clients to find the nexus of mobile communications, technology, and politics and advocacy. And the last time we did this, we had a focus on data. We met with Paul Westcott, president of L2, and we're kind of taking another step further into this world of data, and particularly more around once the data is acquired, what kind of insights you can get out of it. And specifically this time in the world of polling and kind of public opinion. And so joining me today, have Matt Hubbard, EVP at Cygnal. Thanks for coming to Charlotte.
Thanks for having me, Webb. Hard to follow Paul Westcott, but hopefully I'm up for the task and appreciate you guys hosting.
Just riding coattails.
Yeah,
Not a bad position to be in. No, super excited to have you here. We've done a lot of cool work together over the last couple of years, and got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. So I'm going to use my cheat sheet here as a little intro. So Cygnal, so I get this right. Cygnal is a political polling, voter intelligence, and strategic consulting firm focused on helping clients make high-stakes decisions using data-driven insights. And Matt, you are the executive vice president at Cygnal, where you've spent over 11 years. And specifically focusing on the operational and technology infrastructure. And, at Cygnal, one of the most accurate polling and analytics firms in the country, and we'll talk about some of the accolades there in a little bit. But you lead the back office, so product, data, software development, external partnerships, and internal operations. And your work sits at the intersection of voter intelligence and operational scale. And so we'll talk about those things as well. Scale is a big topic for us this year.
Yeah.
And so look forward to diving into it.
It's an election year. Scale is important.
100%. So before we get in kind of, into the business, I'd love to learn more about, 11 years at Cygnal, and just peeking at LinkedIn, I'm like, that's right out of college, more or less. So I'd love to just kind of hear your story, how you got into the business, and kind of where that's led you since.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 11 years already. Before I joined Cygnal, you're right. It was shortly after college. I spent some time during the 2014 cycle working with the College Republican National Committee, and through that got connected with Brent Buchanan, the founder and CEO of Cygnal, and offered me an internship in January of 2015. And got to join the firm and have been there since.
Did you have any thought that you would be in this kind of polling world? Because I know we were talking at lunch, Cygnal wasn't always the Cygnal as it is today. Y'all did other things versus really focusing in on kind of polling and research, right?
Yeah, so when I joined the firm in 2015, it was 4 people. We had a multitude of services. So we did everything from general consulting to strategic communications to mail and commercials. We got into digital advertising for a little bit there, and we had polling as a service as well. And so we were kind of the everything shop. And, as we started to grow, we learned that, we had some things that we were really good at, and that were scalable. And we kind of looked at that and we said, you know what? We really want to help campaigns with data and insights and polling. And so in the 2018 cycle, we narrowed our focus to really focus on polling, analytics, data, and kind of what we would encompass and call voter intelligence. And
was there something in 2018, like specifically, that was like the catalyst of like, hey, this is the opportunity, or like this is the sweet spot that kind of turn things for you?
I think it was really just looking at the firm being ready to grow and grow at a faster rate than it was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to scale strategic communications or general consulting to some degrees. And so, and we also just felt like, we were able to help clients in the polling realm, particularly where, you felt like you could have your data, fast, affordable, or reliable, but you could only have 2. And we felt like we could offer, our clients all 3. And so, that was really the catalyst.
Gotcha.
And from there, we ended up moving the firm from a small office in Montgomery, Alabama in 2019 to the Washington, D.C. area, and we've grown to almost 40 team members today.
That's awesome. Big shift, Montgomery to DC.
Big shift, a little different pace.
Yeah. Is that to just get more in the center of action, more or less, going to DC?
Yeah, I think at the time, our founder, Brent, I mean, he was spending a lot of time with clients around the DC area. He was traveling a lot. The firm had grown kind of beyond just the corner of like Alabama, Georgia, Florida. We were kind
Mhm.
of spreading out throughout the country. And so DC is a hub for everyone in the industry. And so it was easy to be there to meet with clients to really, grow the presence.
Gotcha. I have to ask, you didn't go to Auburn or Alabama, but is there an allegiance there?
If you're born in Alabama, there is an allegiance.
Yeah.
So I'm an Auburn fan.
Okay.
So it's been a tough run for a few years, but we'll see what happens.
Never know. Things can
Even
change.
basketball kind of bummed us out this year, but
Yeah.
we'll take the NIT consolation prize.
To digress. A lot of kids going to Auburn from Charlotte these days. I feel like
They're smart.
they're smart. They're
Your
very
school
smart.
system's serving you well, making good decisions.
So they're doing something right. Pulling a lot of folks from here.
Yeah.
So, over these 11 years, obviously focusing on kind of what y'all see as like what you do best, what's scalable. Clearly that's working. So congrats to y'all on that, going from, 4 to 40 folks on the team. We'll talk about the accolades here in a bit, but, I'm curious, polling has been more or less kind of in the U.S. political kind of system for 2 centuries. Obviously things have changed tremendously over 2 centuries, but even in 11 years being it's like a part of Cygnal, I mean, what have you seen be kind of like the really monumental shifts in how y'all do business and how polling is executed and also maybe like perceived with your clients?
Yeah. I mean, the changes really come down to the changing patterns in communication among, generally adults, but voters as well.
Mhm.
In 2018, when we started to make that shift, I think it was 78% of US adults had a smartphone, and it's now well over 90%.
Mhm.
And you look at even the changing communication patterns on the phone. Speaking for myself personally, the phone function is one of the things I use the least on the phone. And so it really changes how pollsters have to engage. If you're going to get a representative sample and reach people, you have to reach them where they're at. And so you have changing methods for reaching those voters is one of the biggest things we've seen transition over time.
Gotcha. What about just misconceptions in the industry around polling? Obviously I think what's most visible to the general public are just like kind of like the polling around like how a race is trending.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously you do a lot more work with your clients as to how how they're using that data and the insights as part of the work that they're doing in their race or in their effort. But what are you seeing as like a misconception and how you guys are kind of closing that gap?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there's misconceptions outside of the industry and then inside.
Mm-hmm.
Outside the industry, I think the easy misconception is that the ballot's the only thing that matters, and it does matter. It's important, but that's one piece of a much bigger picture. And so, as a practitioner, when you look at a survey, you're looking at yes, the ballot, but you're triangulating data across the results to figure out what's driving the ballot and what can I change. So, if the ballot is your scoreboard, everything else on the survey is your game tape. And so trying to figure out how to improve your performance on it, that's the difference between kind of the public perception and the, how practitioners look at it. And then I think within the industry, I think there's a misconception that qualitative research is a luxury good. There are budget constraints, that is very real. However, qualitative doesn't have to be, a full-fledged focus group. Focus groups are very valuable. They're very helpful. But qualitative can be as simple as including open-ended responses on surveys where you can capture the voter's true voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking them, how they feel about how something's going or, how an elected official is leading can really help you capture not only, what they say, but how they feel. At Cygnal, we pair our open-ended responses on a survey like that with what we call emotional analytics, which is an advanced form of natural language processing where we are able to actually derive one of 10 primary emotions and one of 67 secondary emotions
Hmm.
off of the response. And the value you receive that is way beyond like a word cloud or just simply categorizing the responses. You're able to see not just what voters think, but how they feel about an issue, which ties back to your messaging. When you figure out, like, okay, if the economy is what matters, what message moves the economy? But then how do you frame that to make an emotional connection with the voter, to meet them where they're at? And so, I think looking within the industry as we move towards, we're coming up on primaries, we have the general election coming, thinking of qualitative as it'd be nice to have, really we can move that into, it's accessible and
Hmm.
it's very insightful.
And like you said, it can be more scalable and more like the overhead operationally can be brought down with technology.
Yeah, you can take a, what we would call a quali-quant approach where we're including more qualitative questions on a quantitative survey. It's a real benefit to like an SMS-to-web collection methodology, where we are allowing respondents to type in their responses or their thoughts, and then we can analyze off of that. But it could even be as simple as, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a survey response. We can take any open-ended capture, if it's a text response to voter outreach, and we can run emotional analytics on that and try to identify themes or patterns that we can use for voter engagement.
Gotcha. Um, I gotta ask. You were talking about the kind of the shift from actually picking up the phone when someone calls, how that has probably more or less taken a nosedive for younger folks.
Yeah.
I would say more so than like the boomer generation, but just that very quickly shifting landscape of like how to reach people.
Mhm.
What are you seeing right now with like response rates? Obviously, there's been stuff in the news around iOS 26 and the whole inboxing piece for like text, things that we've talked about kind of in the work we do. But um, where do you see that that's working well?
Mm.
And what are like the biggest hurdles for you guys to get the kind of engagement you expect or that you strive for your work?
Well, I don't want to surprise any listeners, but live phones have continued their 30-year trend downwards.
Yeah,
They're in the low single digits.
shocker. Yeah.
Surprising. Um, and even if you are placing live calls today, you're fighting spam filters, you're fighting call blocking apps to reach a voter who doesn't recognize the number. And then, in our case, we're asking for 10 to 20 minutes of their time to answer pointed questions. So it's challenging. That being said, I mean, live calls have their place. They are important in use cases, but they're challenging, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
really know how to approach it so that at least the responses, like in polling that we collect, are representative. In contrast, SMS has had its challenges as far as the shifting like regulatory landscape,
Yeah.
how the carriers and aggregators are working together to kind of bring some structure to it. But overall, the SMS response rates on the survey side have been much steadier, and I think part of that is um, the copy that we're sending. It's pretty neutral for survey invitations. They have to be, but also voters can choose to interact with it. It doesn't interrupt their process of, they're taking the kids to school or they're making dinner or they're trying to relax in the evening, and
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting that interruption from the phone call. They can take it asynchronously on their time, and I think it helps.
Gotcha. It when folks are is it essentially, are you looking at kind of like higher propensity to respond to a survey, or is it more of like a general population? I guess maybe it depends on like kind of who, like the representation of who you're reaching out to for a specific project. But I'm just curious, like the expectation on who fills out the survey, and then
Mhm.
like how much of their attention in 2026 you have.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we go to form a survey, it starts with, where are we doing the survey? What is the audience, the population? Is it a primary, election? Is it a general election? What, based off of history in that area, tells us the turnout is going to be? from a number of voters, but also demographically, what is it going to look like?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're trying to set your sample frame based off of that. And so from there, we're trying to collect responses based off of that sample frame. And you may have different groups of voters that respond with different rates. So, if I'm calling with live phones to just younger people, that's probably going to be really challenging. Um, but at the same time, there may be some older voters that we need that targeted live call to make sure that our sample is representative. And so, for us, over the time that I've been at Cygnal, that we've been doing this, our focus is always who, not how.
Mm-hmm.
We collect responses. So, who's the voter that's responding? How do they fit into this picture of what we think election day is going to be? And less about exactly how we engage them. It's who they are.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of takes me to my next just point here of like you've managed to figure that out seemingly. I mean, if I look at some of these accolades, ranked number one most accurate pollster by New York Times and Nate Silver for 4 consecutive cycles, 95% accuracy rates, 1,000 plus polls a year, 3,000 plus campaigns across all 50 states. So clearly, and it kind of goes back to what you were talking about in the very beginning, it's like this intersection of high quality at scale, because we're talking, thousands of campaigns, thousands of polls being run at a high accuracy rate. So what and how you've built Cygnal, and I know in your focus, you are kind of helping to operate, or you're leading the operation of the machine. Like in your mind, kind of the big reasons why you are able to achieve these kinds of things as a company.
Precision at scale is a protocol challenge, and protocol is really driven by people and process. And so for us, growing from 4 people in a small office in Alabama to almost 40 and being in the DC area today, we really focused on, for the products and services we offer, who do we need on this team to do it? Right. So we wanted to hire domain experts, not just folks with political experience, although we have a lot of that. But, at every step of the process, every layer, what domain expertise do we need to be the best at this? And so, if you look at our team today, our pollsters have a wealth of political operative experience. So do our client services team. When you get to the data team, you have statisticians and data scientists, and you still have, political experience, people who have run field operations. And so all of that combines to help us build, execute, and refine our processes in-house. And so because we brought these things in-house, it helps us control each step and the quality. And that's what creates this kind of repeatable success over time.
And what about partnerships? Because I know that's how we know one another. I know that's a big part of your mission. How has that played into the process piece of it?
Yeah. So with our external partners, we are very selective in who we work with. In the same way, we want to hire domain expertise with our team internally. We want to partner with the best in class, whether that is data providers, phone vendors, messaging. And so that's, Wonder Cave, we get to work with you guys. You're the best at what you do. And so we view external partnerships just as important as kind of the internal team on making sure that we are leveraging expertise elsewhere.
Thank you for saying that.
Appreciate
that. Yeah, thank you. Well, chatting earlier about this, it was kind of interesting when we had our first conversation, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago now. You were very clear up front. You were like, we have built a texting platform ourselves. Like we've gone down this road. We kind of know some of the ins and outs. So I think that was part of just like, hey, I don't know you yet. So, I'm not snowed into kind of what this is all about. But also you were very clear, like, hey, we have attempted doing this. There were some good learnings, but ultimately this is not something we want to kind of maintain in-house. I'd love to hear more, just you expanding on like what that journey was like, and then kind of how that plays into, again, kind of external partners as like an extension of what you do best, but leaning on what a partner does best.
Yes, I think the 2018 cycle was the first time that we really broadly deployed SMS across a lot of surveys, and we did some testing of it in the 2016 cycle. And in 2018 rolled around, we said this has potential. We were looking at the adoption of smartphones, like I mentioned a minute ago, rising. Today we kind of saw the trajectory where today it's four out of every five households is wireless only, like 3 out of 5 seniors are. And so we saw that trajectory early, and we said we really need to adjust how we communicate with people to meet them where they're at. And so it was the wild west of texting during
Oh
like
yeah,
the 2018 cycle. I mean, there's like almost no rules. There's some, almost none though. And
yeah,
so
not many. Yeah.
yeah, we spun up a platform pretty quickly in house to execute our texting. And during the 2018 cycle, it was okay. Like I would set projects up during the day, and our team would, and then we would send messages in the afternoon and evening. We'd just go home and be sending messages. Even Brent, our CEO, like if we had a high volume of projects going on, he would go home and be sending messages with us.
Because in 2018, I guess for context, it was kind of a couple of things happening. So one, there weren't rules to your point, but two, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but it just hit me. It's like, yeah, the FCC kind of dubbed texting as like a non-regulated space, essentially.
Yeah.
So they kind of said text messaging is an information service. We're kind of taking a step back, minus the TCPA still in place.
Mm-hmm.
But like carriers are kind of the ones to kind of police their own sandbox. So yeah, it was like
Yeah.
very much a have at it kind of situation. And
When it seemed like it happened so fast that the carriers weren't even implementing structure too much at that point. So it was kind of this free for all, and so it worked great during the 2018 cycle. We really kind of saw like the proof of concept of reaching people with text messages, and we kept that platform into the 2020 cycle. But it became the volume that we needed to send was challenging. We had a few contractors that came on just to send text messages. We had interns doing it, and we just kind of said, "Man, is this where we need to focus our team?"
mhm.
At that point in time, the carriers, the ecosystem was trying to bring structure to it and bring compliance, which is good. But that created a new, like, you have to know how to navigate that. And so we kind of made the decision. We said we want our team focused on data insights and helping our clients, not necessarily figuring out, what do I need to make sure T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T have. Like we want to do that. It's just not our wheelhouse. And so we started talking with external partners and saying, who can we partner with who we can, we still want to send these messages. We still believe in the channel, but we need someone who knows how to navigate that side of it, who can partner with us and who can manage the scaling up and down of sending the messages itself in a compliant way. And so that led us to work with Wonder Cave and a few other partners on that side. And it's been great. I mean, we have a high bar for our external partners. We constantly are evaluating that. And so, it's a selective process, and we're, proud to partner with Wonder Cave.
Well, appreciate that. And we feel the same way. And yeah, and, in terms of, this space, it's so relationship based. I think any kind of technology partnership is going to require like a level of trust, but particularly like it's such a high stakes industry that we kind of operate in. Um, the ability to just follow through on very kind of like a kind of quick turn type projects really exposes that as like is the trust truly there, and is the follow through truly there. um I'm curious kind of as we approach, further getting closer to the most high stakes kind of part of the year politically speaking. um what does that look like for y'all? I mean, obviously the last week before the general, things kind of pull back because it's more of just mobilization. But do you have some really tight turns with some of this client work? I'm curious what that like war room looks like at Cygnal as you get deep into the cycle.
Yeah, it can vary. I mean, we start seeing, obviously since primaries are kind of spread out, it helps balance the volume. But as clients get past primaries, we start turning the general election. You'll see a lot of folks do their benchmark surveys over the summer, so July, August timeframe, figure out what they think their core messages are, and then they go out and start executing on voter outreach. And so, it's been interesting over the last few cycles because I think one of the things that have changed with early voting is it used to be October was like the main rush.
Hmm.
And it still is, but with early voting, you kind of see this timeline of doing brush fire check-ins move a little earlier. And so through about mid-September through the third week in October, it is just it's a fire drill. We have, some clients, especially on larger races, you see that you can kind of plan out, when the benchmark's going to be, you're going to do, um, you know, one brush fire in September, one in October, or maybe, give or take a few. But then you're also going to get your political surprises, and you're going to need to go in the field, and you're going to need to find out how to respond to it.
Hmm.
And the turn time is important, right? Because what is a hot headline on Monday, it may have moved on by Tuesday afternoon. If you're not able to get data till Thursday, like you're responding to a world that's moved on. And so it's really important that you have a partner that you can call and get into the field quickly and collect the data that you need to respond appropriately.
Is that something you've seen between 2015? I mean, still a very digital, kind of fast-paced world in 2015, but even between 15 and 26, just the pace of like the news cycle and like shifting narratives, like from your vantage point, have you seen that accelerate over the last 10, 11 years?
Oh yeah. I mean, the timelines are constantly compressing. I
Yeah.
mean, the news cycle, it's been 24 hours a day, for a while, but it seems like, you can go to lunch and come back and the world's changed.
Yeah.
And it's not just the pace of news that's coming out, but voters are consuming more and more information through like algorithmic feeds, which means that it is reinforcing kind of what they already believe or their perspective. And so, from a campaign perspective, your window to engage a voter is very short before they they ingrain that feeling emotionally into their um, into their view.
Hmm.
And voters for the most part, we make decisions emotionally, and we try to back it up with logic. And so it kind of goes back to the idea of emotional analytics and qualitative, like really understanding not just what needs to be said, but how to say it is more vital than ever.
Yeah. They might answer it, but like, how are they answering it? Like, how strongly do they believe in what they're saying?
Yeah, well, how are they answering it? But also, how do you need to answer, and how do you need to
Yeah.
respond, and how do you connect on that?
So we obviously touched on kind of the decline of calls, the steadiness of the texting channel, as it still remains kind of like a ubiquitous, just like a native app in the phone. Everyone has a smartphone. Are there other modes that are like kind of rising in interest for you guys, or like you seeing, some interesting trends?
I think the most interesting trend right now that we have noticed is from, I would say, like 2020 to 2024, you saw online panels become more viable for sample collection in particularly larger geographies. So, like your statewide, some congressional districts.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that you could get a handful of responses, but you just didn't have the coverage. And you really saw the coverage improve kind of that 2020 to 2024 window. But now we're seeing like the coverage has improved, but we're also getting a lot more fraud.
Hmm.
Um, and some of that is just unfortunately, the downside of AI. AI has a ton of upside, but the downside is it helps some bad actors create sophisticated operations, and so you really have to be ahead of that. And so we see that on the panel side where, you know, okay, yes, we get better coverage, but we also have a really important task of knowing what's real and what's not. And
How
then
do you do that?
so there are ways to, you can gauge your basic like length of interview, response patterns,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, as AI comes in, you need some purpose-built tools to identify that. So we have some external partners that we work with that look at um, just a multitude of factors with each respondent to try to determine, is this a human?
Hmm.
Is it a bot? Is it AI controlling a browser? And it's more complex than you think it would.
Yeah.
And you look at a survey and you think, okay, what's the reward's 25 cents? Why would someone spend time? But these operations are huge, and it does become, an economic incentive for someone to be a bad actor. And so, you know, if you have the right partner with that, you can start to identify and cut out. And then it's also choosing what panels you work with. If fraud hits a certain level with a panel, like, okay, maybe we need to not include that at all until they can kind of get together. And so there's kind of I don't want to say a crisis, but there is a growing trend of fraud in that marketplace that's going to have to get corrected.
It's fascinating. I mean, I would assume it's bad actors essentially, like if they're, giving this feedback, it is influencing narratives, which then influences outcomes, right? I mean, is that what we're seeing? Bad actors with a kind of driven to get a particular outcome.
Yeah, you could see that. I mean, I don't know exactly what I imagine the motivation there for bad actors is more the economic incentive on the panel front.
Just generating.
Just getting the incentive. But, that's not to say that there couldn't be bad actors that are really actually trying to drive
nonetheless
a narrative.
Nefarious. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Shifting gears a little bit, over the last 11 years, I'd love to hear about, like, obviously we don't have to say exactly who, but if there's a particular, like, kind of just client work that you've done that just sticks out, like really interesting, just story that goes into it, or twist and turn. Because obviously, like, all these clients are so different, all these campaigns are so different. Anything that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean, so we've had some interesting projects domestically where, we focus so much on like the technology side of responses that sometimes you get an interesting situation. We had a project several years ago where it was a high Hispanic speaking area and a low population. And so we actually, we started looking at our collection modes. We're going, none of these are viable. Like, our only option is really to send in canvassers, door-to-door bilingual canvassers. Nice. And so we got to do that, which is something we never thought would happen domestically. And so that was a cool project, pretty unique, kind of challenged your understanding of it. And then, the international work that we do is so interesting. We've gotten to work in a number of countries, and each country is unique because you're going in not without any knowledge, but you're going in, you're trying to learn, like, culturally what's important. Sometimes you have like census demographics or the equivalents of it, of what you need to do, and then sometimes you're trying to figure that out on the go. And so the international work is always challenging because it's not just how do I collect the sample, but like, what do we need to collect? What's important among this population? And so you start to see, even in some of the responses, the top issues are surprising. You start to see even some of their, like, I would say, regional conspiracy theories start to pop up. And so it's always some of the most interesting work we can do.
Yeah. Well, what's that spread internationally for y'all?
We've done work in, Europe, Africa, and Asia, wow, Latin America, the Caribbean,
the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty solid spread.
We're working on Antarctica, but
yeah. That is fascinating. Just like you said, I mean, just such differences culturally, probably, like, just the political environment.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? How are you entering into a new country, a new, like, kind of marketplace as Cygnal?
Yeah, I mean, it's still relationship based.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's I would say that's very consistent, even as you get in the international space, that it is relationship based. And so some of our pollsters are focused on developing those relationships internationally. And so, sometimes it's domestic relationships that lead to international work. Mm-hmm. And so they're longer developing on the time horizon. And always, like I said, you're starting with a different approach and mindset going into it.
And I have to ask, since our business is text messaging, but I know it's very different outside of the US. Do you do some work, like, with the over the top, like, apps, like a WhatsApp or Messenger, Line, things like that? Or do you still use texting, or is that totally
We've looked
different?
into it. We've used texting some in a few places. Usually the bottleneck there is the data source. So, in the US, like, we have great partners that provide voter data for us that we can start with our contact list. You don't get that as much internationally, or if you do, it's not as reliable or up to date. So we've done some texting. A lot of times, you're doing a door-to-door or
Hmm.
face-to-face intercepts, which, again, also leads to just some interesting situations in data quality control.
Face-to-face intercept. That's a
Yeah.
interesting way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll have a lot of times the interviewer they'll station at strategic places within an area. So if you're looking at, whatever the equivalent of like maybe a province, the
Hmm.
area of the province that you're looking at, you may go to like a shopping mall, to a grocery store, something like that. And so much like in the US, you may find
Hmm.
people who are
With
running
a clipboard.
petitions.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're out with, a tablet and asking people, if they'll take the survey. And
Gotcha.
so in some areas, that's how you get it. In other areas, it's still door-to-door canvassing. So the interviews can happen by strategically going through neighborhoods and doing door-to-door interviews.
Is there an incentive to completing it? I guess depending on the format.
It depends on the format. Sometimes they're needed, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
But that's also, uh, that's a different challenge even in how you deliver incentives internationally.
I've got a couple rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What is the most overrated metric in polling?
Hopefully this one doesn't get me in trouble. Bad likelihood to vote questions. So, or
Okay.
I'd say maybe simple. If you simply ask voters, are you likely to vote or not? The social bias is yes, I'm going to vote. So now all of a sudden, 90% of respondents say they're going to vote.
Is that just because they don't want to be judged?
Yeah,
Even if like no one's paying attention, but like, yeah, of course I'm going to vote.
it's a social desirability bias. So
Yeah.
they want to be thought of as someone who is going to vote, and they probably think of themselves as someone who's going to vote. And then you look at their voter record and you're like, well, you haven't voted in any of the last 8 elections.
Mhm.
So are you likely? And so you really had to format that question in a way that is trying to gauge their determination and also their method. And so you can ask a good question on the front of the survey to help you screen that and actually deliver, more insight. But if you're simply saying, are you likely to vote or not? It's a pretty overrated question.
Biggest mistake campaigns make with the data they get back?
Reading what they want in the data. So looking for a reinforcement loop as opposed to trusting what the data says and making decisions off of that. And I think sometimes that comes down to the speed at which we operate and a comfort level of, especially when it comes down to crunch time on the campaign. And as the consultant or the team, you're going to have to own the outcomes. Like there's a piece there of like, oh, I'm comfortable with this approach. I've seen this work before. But if you read that into the data without trusting what the data says, the outcome may not work out.
I was actually thinking about that point earlier in the conversation around like the role Cygnal plays in just being like, here's the data, like here are the insights, whether you choose to kind of believe them or not, that there's a level of trust with that. I mean, it could be a hard truth. Things are shifting away from, like you said, like what you're comfortable with. I guess that is just years of building this business and establishing trust with clients, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a factor there that is certainly the data quality, the consistency and accuracy, and then there's also the relationship between the pollster and the client.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much a strategic advisor role, and so there has to be a really, you know, solid level of trust to be able to go in and tell someone that what they're doing is working or what they're doing isn't going well. And at the end of the day, that may be telling that to the general consultant, it may be the campaign manager, it may be the candidate themselves. But you do have to have a level of trust when you go in and say that and deliver it, and then try to get them to trust that like this data is actually accurate, it is real, and we do have to act on it.
All right, last one. One thing, this is a big one. One thing that will define the 2026 cycle.
I don't know if we've seen it yet.
Yeah.
I think we've seen a lot of ways that it could go, right? It could be inflation, it could be the cost of fuel, it could be the situation in Iran and the Middle East, it could be AI and data centers. But I don't know if the defining event or narrative has fully developed yet. I think it's still very early on that. If you look at the last couple cycles, the way decisions like Dobbs changed the game. I think it's going to come in late summer, early fall. And
I was going to ask timing. That's what you think?
That's when we're going to see the defining narrative really start to develop.
Time will tell. Well, it was a pleasure, and
Great
we
to be
love
here.
working with your team. And thank you for all the insights. I certainly learned a lot just chatting with you here. And, y'all built a great business at Cygnal, and just wish you guys the best of luck this year.
Awesome. Thanks, Webb. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you.